Ever feel like, everyone else has their finances like totally figured out. And then there's you, right? Like trying to understand your bank statements like it's some ancient scroll or something.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I get it.
Well, listeners have sent in some excerpts from this book, What They Don't Teach You About Money by Claer Barrett. So that's what we're going to deep dive today. She talks about these like 7 habits for financial independence. And let me tell you, some of this stuff is really eye-opening, like things I wish I'd known a lot earlier.
Yeah, it's funny how we always think about money as like this super logical thing, right? But Claer Barrett really nails it when she starts talking about these financial personalities we all have and how much our emotions actually play into like our spending habits,
Yeah.
you know?
Totally. It's not just about spreadsheets and budgets and all that. It's like there's this whole psychology behind the way we handle money. And she has this whole thing about this spending to save thing. Have you heard of that? It's like this myth that we all kind of fall for.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like she tells the story about buying a discounted jumper even though her closet's already overflowing. It's so relatable, like those too good to pass up deals that end up at the back of your closet with the tag still on.
It's so true, though. It's like retailers have figured out how to like hack our brains. Like that feeling you get when you see a sale, that little rush, it's not by accident. They're totally playing us.
Oh, absolutely. They know what they're doing. So how do we outsmart like our brains and those tempting sales then?
Well, Claer Barrett has this great tip in the book. Before you buy anything on sale, ask yourself if you would buy it at full price.
Wow. Okay, yeah. That's actually...
It makes you think twice.
It does. It makes you think twice. So that's impulse buying, but being mindful with your money is way more than that, right?
Yeah, totally. It's about being aware of where your money's going and making conscious choices.
Yeah.
And one thing that she talks about is calculating how many hours of work it takes to pay for something.
Oh, wow. I've never thought of it like that.
Yeah, like say you make $25 an hour and you're looking at those $50 shoes, suddenly it's not just a purchase, it's 2 hours of your life.
Whoa. Okay, that's... Yeah, when you put it like that.
Yeah, it changes your perspective.
It really does. It really does. And speaking of perspective, let's talk about budgeting.
No. I can hear everyone tuning out already, but trust me, this isn't about like, that restrictive, joyless kind of budgeting.
Right.
Claer Barrett's not about that at all.
It's about making informed decisions, right?
Yeah.
Knowing where your money's going. I mean, there are so many great budgeting apps out there now that make it so easy. They track your spending, categorize everything, even help you set financial goals. Honestly, you might be surprised by what you learn about your own habits.
Okay, so next up is a topic that nobody likes to talk about. Debt. Specifically, credit card debt. Claer Barrett tells this very relatable story about buying a coffee table on credit. And it really shows how easy it is for things to like snowball out of control. Right, it's the compound interest. That's the real sneaky part. It's not just interest on what you borrowed, it's interest on the interest. It can turn a small debt into a huge problem so quickly.
It's scary how quickly it can happen. And it's like those buy now, pay later options make it so easy to overspend too, because you're only paying a little bit each month.
Totally.
Yeah.
They make it seem way more manageable than it actually is. Right. You have to think about the opportunity cost. Like, are those BNPL payments stopping you from doing other things, like saving for a down payment or investing?
Which brings us to a huge goal a lot of people have, buying a home. But Claer Barrett gets real about how tough it can be, and how inheriting money is often like this hidden advantage that not everyone has.
Yeah, and she talks about this viral tweet asking people how they bought their first homes, and the responses were really interesting. A lot of it was inheritance, family loans. It just shows how uneven the playing field can be.
Definitely. And she also talks about quantitative easing, or QE, which I'll be honest, I had to look up.
Yeah.
But basically, it's this thing that pumped money into the economy, and it actually caused property prices to go way up.
Yeah, it had a big impact on the housing market. And now that interest rates are rising and QE is winding down, it'll be interesting to see what happens to prices. It could be good news for people who've been priced out, but it's definitely something to watch.
So buying a house might seem impossible for a lot of people, but Claer Barrett talks about another way to build wealth, and that's investing.
Right. She's all about this idea of like getting rich slowly. You don't have to be some kind of Wall Street genius. It's more about starting early, even if you don't have a lot to invest, and letting compound interest do its thing.
Okay, so compound interest, it sounds kind of complicated. What is that exactly?
She compares it to like a magic potion for your money. Like say you invest just $100 today and it makes a 10% return every year. In 7 years, you'll have almost doubled your money just from the compounding. It's like your money is making money and then that money makes money too.
Wow, that's actually... Okay, so how do we get in on this magic potion?
Well, she talks a lot about pensions, which are basically these long-term savings plans for when you retire. You put money in regularly, usually your employer chips in too, and then all of that gets invested and grows over time.
And there are tax benefits too, right? So it's like a win-win.
Exactly, yeah. And then she also mentions ISAs, which are individual savings accounts. These are more flexible, and you can invest in different things.
So like choosing your own adventure for your money.
Yeah, exactly. With a stocks and shares ISA, you can invest in like individual company stocks or in these things called funds, which track a whole bunch of stocks at once, like the whole stock market.
So it's less about picking individual stocks and more about investing in the market as a whole.
Exactly. They're a really good way to get started with investing without having to be a stock expert. And usually they're cheaper to invest in than other types of funds.
Okay, that makes sense. And she talks about not checking your investments constantly, right?
Yeah, that's a big one. Because it's really easy to get caught up in like the day-to-day ups and downs of the market. It's a long game.
Right. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So we're investing for the future, but we also need to make sure we're earning as much as we can right now, right? Claer Barrett has some good advice about negotiating a pay raise.
Yeah. She talks about knowing your worth, do your research, and figure out what other people in similar roles are making, and then be ready to explain why you deserve that much, like what value you bring to the company.
It's about advocating for yourself, which can be tough for a lot of people.
For sure.
Yeah.
But it's worth it. And when you're making your case, she says it's important to focus on your accomplishments, not on personal reasons, like needing to pay your rent or whatever.
That's good advice. Speaking of side hustles, Claer Barrett gets real about those too. It seems like everyone has one these days.
Right. She's not saying don't do them, but she emphasizes that it's not just about jumping into the first side hustle opportunity you find. You need to think about the return on investment, like how much time and effort you're putting in versus how much money you're actually making.
Right. You don't want to be working on your side hustle more than your actual job and then not making any extra money.
Yeah. And if you do have a side hustle, she says it's super important to be upfront with your employer about it, just to make sure there are no conflicts of interest. And of course, you got to think about taxes.
Oh, right. Taxes. That's a whole other thing. She covers a lot of different types of side hustles, like selling stuff online, freelancing, even renting out a room in your place.
Right. And each one has its own pros and cons. It's all about finding something that works for you, something that you're good at and that you enjoy doing. And speaking of things that are important but nobody likes to talk about, Claer Barrett also talks a lot about the importance of talking about money, like with your partner or your family.
Oh, I know. It can be so awkward, right? But it's so important.
Right. Like how can you make good financial decisions together if you're not even on the same page?
It's true. It's like we're almost conditioned to not talk about money. But if you can't talk about it, how can you possibly make good decisions as a couple, you know?
Exactly. And it's not just couples. Even talking to friends about money can be so helpful, you know? Sharing tips, learning from each other's experiences.
Yeah, like having a money support group so it feels less scary and overwhelming. You know what I mean?
Totally. And Claer Barrett also gets into some really specific financial challenges in the book, like student loans, which can feel like this huge weight for people, especially when they're just starting out.
Right. Those loan payments can be a lot to handle when you're fresh out of school.
For sure. So she explains how the whole repayment system works. Like you only start paying back when you're earning over a certain amount, and your payments are based on your income. So it's designed to be manageable.
That makes sense. It's not like they just expect you to pay it all back right away.
Yeah, exactly. But then she also talks about whether or not it makes sense to overpay on your student loans, like if you're in a position to do that. So you can kind of weigh your options and decide what's best for you.
It's about having all the information so you can make informed choices. Another thing she talks about that really resonated with me is financial resilience. Like being prepared for anything, right?
Totally. It's like building a strong financial foundation that can handle whatever life throws at you, whether it's losing your job or having a medical emergency.
Right, so you're not totally freaking out if something unexpected happens.
Exactly. That's why she talks about having an emergency fund. You know, having that safety net can make such a difference.
It's about having that peace of mind, knowing that you've got a buffer. And ultimately, I think what Claer Barrett really drives home is that financial independence isn't just about, like, having a ton of money. It's about freedom, right?
Absolutely. It's about having the freedom to make choices that align with your values, to pursue your passions, to design a life that you love.
I love that. So as we wrap up this deep dive into what they don't teach you about money, what's like the one thing you hope listeners will take away from this conversation?
Honestly, I think the biggest takeaway is that financial empowerment is possible for everyone. It's not about becoming some kind of financial expert overnight. It's about taking small, consistent steps that will add up to big changes in the long run.
I totally agree. And it can even be something really small like downloading a budgeting app, having that awkward money conversation with your partner, or just like taking some time to research different investment options. Every little bit helps, right?
Absolutely. Knowledge is power. And the more you know about personal finance, the more control you have over your own financial future.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into financial independence, everyone. And remember, every journey starts with a single step. So what will yours be?